The purpose of this video is just to walk through what I call the 10 most meaningful questions you can ask any bank representative to help you get an update on what's going on with your loan modification. If you're a subscriber to my page, welcome back. If not, make sure you subscribe, like the videos below. It really helps me get the information out to everyone that needs it. So these are questions that you're going to be asking the bank when you call to ask for an update on your loan modification. So if you're doing your loan modification yourself, you've probably sent in your documents, the process has been started, and you're going to be making regular phone calls to the bank to find out what's going on. The worst thing you can do is be unprepared with your questions when you call them, because they're just going to try to quickly get you off the phone and you might not be able to get any real information. So I'm just going to walk through 10 questions. You should write these questions down, and every time you call, ask them. Make sure you're getting good information. Question number 1, is my file open and active in loss mitigation? So you are using the bank's terminology there, and what you're asking the bank representative to confirm is my file open and is it active? If your file is open, that means somebody is assigned, somebody is working on it, it is open in the loss mitigation department. Even if you're far along in your review, even if you're like, of course my file's open, they've had it for 3 weeks, don't assume that. Sometimes files get closed, sometimes banks make mistakes. So every time you call, you should ask them, is it open and is it active? And they will say, yes, you have an open loss mitigation request. If they say no and they tell you your file's closed, that's a good indicator to you that you got to figure out kind of what to do next and what happened. Question number 2, is there any foreclosure activity showing on the account? Now, you might be applying for a loan modification when you know you have a foreclosure auction date set. You can still apply for a loan mod in some situations. You might be applying when you know that you have received, for example, a first notice of foreclosure. You might be early in the process. You might already know where you're at on the foreclosure timeline, but you should still ask when you call, because that will encourage the bank to read you what is going on with the foreclosure activity, so that if anything unusual, potentially illegal, or weird pops up, you hear it every time you call. Is there any foreclosure activity showing on the account? That's question number 2. Question number 3, is there a foreclosure attorney's office assigned to the account? This is a good question for you if you're early in the default process. So if you've defaulted and you're like 2 to 3 months behind and you're applying for a loan modification, you might not technically be in foreclosure yet. And there's a video about the difference between in default and in foreclosure, but you might not be in foreclosure yet. And what you're kind of trying to track with this question is how far the bank is going along in the process of moving you to foreclosure. They might tell you, nope, there's no foreclosure attorney's office assigned, or they might say, yes, actually, we've just assigned an attorney's office. What that will indicate to you is foreclosure activity is coming. Once they've assigned a foreclosure attorney, then they kind of get closer and closer to the foreclosure activity. So that's a great question to ask if you're early in the process. Question number 4, can you please tell me the date the most recent note was made on my file? So this is a very good question to ask. It's a very specific question to ask. It's a better question than what is going on with my file or can I have an update? Because what you're doing with this question is you're telling the bank that they need to tell you the day that someone touched your file and did something. If you just say, can I have an update? They'll just read you the most recent note, and they'll typically say something like, it's in review, it's moving forward. But if you ask them to tell you the date that somebody worked on it, you can truly verify for yourself when somebody worked on it. And if the date is like over 4 weeks ago, you'll then know that your loan modification is stalled out, and you can use some of the tactics on this page and on my blog post to kind of help get your modification moving. So ask them to read you the date. If the date's within like 7 to 10 days, that means they're working on it. But if it's about at that 10-day mark, there should be a date in 10 days, right? But you always want to make sure you know the actual date that people are working on it. Question number 5, can you please read me the most recent note made on my file? Again, this is a better question than saying, can I have an update? Because when you say, can I have an update, you're giving the bank representative the ability to summarize and use their own words after they read the note. And oftentimes, as you know, when someone tries to relay information instead of reading it, things get missed, things get translated incorrectly. You don't want to be asking for an update through the brain of that customer service representative. You want them to read you the actual note that the underwriter made on the account. So just say, hey, you know what, they won't want to do it, but say, for my benefit, can you just read me word for word what is the note on the account? And then that way you make sure you get all of the information. Question number 6, is my file being worked by an underwriter or a document processor? This question relates to what phase of the loan modification review you're in. If you want information about phase 1 and phase 2, there are videos about that here. But you're basically trying to track with this question whether your file has moved from the document processing phase to the underwriting phase. Once you're with an underwriter, you're getting close to the decision-making phase of the process. So that's a good question to just kind of gauge, is it still with people reviewing my documents or is it with an underwriter? And banks should be able to look and see who it's assigned to, and they'll tell you like, oh, it's with an underwriter, or they'll say, oh, it's with a document processor, and then you'll kind of be able to know how your file is going. Question number 7, it's similar to a question earlier, but the question is, when was the last time someone touched my file? Who was it, and what did they do? This is similar to asking the date that your file was touched, but this is just getting a little more specific information. And what you should be doing is writing down, you want to know the names of the people working on your file, and you want to know what they're doing. What you're doing is you're creating your own record so that if something goes wrong, you know the last thing that happened, so that when you eventually talk to a supervisor or come to an attorney for help, you have a good record of everything that's going on. So get their names, get what they did, get the date that they touched your file. A lot of lenders identify their customer service reps by employee ID number. So if the representative says back to you, oh, I can't give you their name, then you can say back to them, great, can I have their employee ID number? Question number 8, are there any documents missing or anything showing as needed from me? And even if you've been told that your file's been deemed complete, that doesn't mean that it suddenly can't become incomplete. So as you're calling, until you have a decision back, every time you call, ask them, is there anything missing? Is there anything you need from me? The reason you want to ask this every time is it's not a given that the customer service representatives will be able to tell you every time if you don't ask them directly. Oftentimes missing documents are listed on a different screen in the loss mitigation in the loss mitigation system. Often the notes saying what documents are missing are on a different page. And so if you don't ask that representative to go directly to that screen, they might not think to read them to you. So ask it every time you call. Question number 9, has the file been submitted to the investor for a decision yet? So what you're asking them here is, has my file made it to the final phase? So your file will go through document processing, your file will then be reviewed by an underwriter. Then the underwriter will submit the file to the investor for a final decision. There's more information about these phases in other videos, but basically you're trying to track when has my file moved through all of these processes and is like in line for a decision. If the bank representatives tell you, yes, your file's been submitted to the investor, you are likely very close to receiving your decision back on your loan modification. All right, the final question, question number 10. This one seems obvious, but you always want to ask it. Has a decision been issued on my file? Banks will tell you when there's a decision issued via mail, but if you're calling regularly, you can likely get a verbal decision back sooner and figure out what's going on. And you also have to ask this directly for the same reason that you ask the document question directly, which is sometimes if you don't ask them directly, they don't go to the screen that has the information and they don't tell you. So every time you call for an update, ask them if there's been a decision issued yet. All right, good luck. Let me know if you need any help.